Today I'll be demonstrating the double flaring toolkit for making your own brake lines. I'll be starting with 3/16 steel brake line that's Teflon coated. I've got 10mm fittings that are 1mm thread pitch for Nissan, a pipe cutting tool, some chase base stainless braided lines, and then the double flaring toolkit itself, which consists of the clamp, the flare, and then the other little compression piece. I'll start by showing off this little pipe cutting tool. You need to make sure you have one small enough. This is 1/8 inch to 1 1/8 inch. We're using 3/16 lines, which is small enough for our application. Tighten that down. As you can see, it leaves you with a nice straight edge. It doesn't compress the tube, which is very important when making brake lines. I have my tube inserted into the flaring bar. I have my adapter set to the height, so it's just about flush right there. And then we start by sticking the adapter in there. Take the yoke assembly, and that goes into that little dimple. We tighten that down, and so we want to crush that until the adapter is flush with the flaring tool. If you're starting from scratch, you can flare one end and then add your fitting. If you're cutting one end off of a brake line, don't forget to install the fitting before you flare that end. So here's some of the brass fittings, the junctions for my old brake lines. This car's been sitting out in the woods for about 8 years. I probably could have got away with it, reused the lines and did all that, but I'm just kind of at that point where I'm down this far, I might as well just make new lines, and that way I don't have to worry about anything. I took these to the brass wheel, polished them up. They look like they're going to work fine. There's 2 of them. Here's the front one, and here's the rear brake splitter. Brake lines off of the car. You can see lots of corrosion, lots of nastiness. Here's the actual brake line. It's better in some places and worse in others. But this way I don't have to worry about anything. So the first thing I'm going to do is mount these junction boxes back where they belong. And then I can measure from front to rear and start. I'll make a little bit longer of a tube than I need, and I can straighten this out and start bending it to fit. out the car, we can begin adding our fluid and then bleeding the brakes. The first thing we need to do is actually bleed the master cylinder itself. So I've got someone helping me. They're going to basically push down on the pedal. I'm going to crack the line open, let the pressure release, close the line, and then they're going to let off the pedal. Up. Down. Go ahead and push down. Up. All right, go back up. And you can see there we had just fluid coming out, no more air in the line. And it made a mess everywhere. Get some brake clean because this stuff is pretty nasty. So now we got the master cylinder bled, we're going to go ahead and bleed the calipers. You always want to start with the caliper that's furthest away from the master cylinder. So here we have our caliper, and one important thing to note is that our bleeder valve is pointing up. In any case, in any situation where you're bleeding something, it's always important to have the valve be the highest point of the system. All right, we have the line cracked open there. Go ahead and push down. Push harder. All right, it's tight. Open up. Now that we have the brake lines ran, I'd like to take a minute and go over some basics on brake fluid. I'll be talking about the four common types, DOT3, 4, 5, and 5.1. The thing that separates these fluids from one another is their respective boiling points. DOT3 having the lowest on average at around 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and DOT5 having the highest at around 550. These numbers vary between brands, and you can always look on the back of the bottle to find out more information on the type that you've selected. It's very important to note that DOT5 is a different composition than 3, 4, and 5.1. DOT5 is silicone based while the others are glycol based, and the two should never be mixed. 3, 4, and 5.1 will all have a wet boiling point as well due to the fact that these fluids are hygroscopic, meaning that they absorb water over time. This changes the property of the fluid as it ages, and it's a good idea to change these fluids every couple of years. The silicone-based DOT5 does not absorb water, meaning that if any water does get into the system, it will separate out and could cause issues there. It also has a tendency to aerate or foam up in an ABS system. While it's technically okay to mix 3, 4, and 5.1, there is no need unless it's absolutely necessary, like the scenario where you're low on brake fluid and there's no other option. Remember that the thing that separates these fluids is their boiling points, so if you're going to be spending the extra money on 5.1, it wouldn't make sense to lower its properties by adding DOT3. So there it is, my entire brake setup. Nothing fancy, no big brake kit, nothing like that. In my experience at the track though, stock does fairly well in drifting. That's not the case for everybody, obviously that's not the case for every racing sport. But in this scenario, I'm happy with the fresh build and everything I have set up so far. From here, I'll eventually be adding an e-brake, a hydro e-brake be added to this setup. And I think I'll eventually need it for, tandeming and things like that. When you're following somebody and you want to make minute changes to your line, I think that's basically where the e-brake comes in. I'm not a fan of initiating with an e-brake. They help in certain scenarios, maybe like where you want to you're coming in too shallow and you want to stay a little long in the drift, and you just kind of hold the e-brake. It'll make you slide to the outside. So there's some tiny things that'll help depending on the scenario. So yeah, thanks for following along. We've got plenty more content coming up with this build. Hope to see you guys out there this year at the track. We'll be at East 10 Pro-Am for the season, Hyperfest, Grid Life South. We'll be out there, so let us know down in the comments below what your plans are for the year and where you'll be. We'll see you soon.